Welcome to another deep dive. Today we're plunging into one of America's most enduring and chilling mysteries, the Black Dahlia murder.
It really is.
A case that's captivated people for, nearly 80 years now.
Yeah.
A real Los Angeles whodunit that just keeps sparking theories.
Absolutely. And we're going to explore the raw facts of this incredibly brutal crime, the life of Elizabeth Short, and, the shocking claims by a former LAPD detective.
About his own father being the killer.
Exactly, his own father. We'll also try to connect this infamous cold case to the broader picture of unsolved crimes, the relentless pursuit of justice.
Okay.
Our mission here is really to unpack the layers of this saga, from the initial horror to its lasting impact. What's fascinating, I think, is how one single brutal event can just weave together so many threads: true crime, family secrets, forensics evolving over time, and the media's role in it all.
Yeah, the media angle is huge here. So let's start with Elizabeth Short herself, the young woman at the center of it all. What do we actually know about who she was before she became the Black Dahlia? That name almost took over, didn't it?
It really did. Well, Elizabeth Short was 22 when she was murdered in 1947. She'd moved to LA in July 46, so she spent her last 6 months in Southern California,
Right.
mostly working as a waitress, renting a room near the Florentine Gardens nightclub. And that popular idea of her as an aspiring actress, seems to be more myth than reality.
Really?
Yeah, the sources we looked at describe her more as an unfocused fantasist, someone who was kind of drifting, maybe looking to meet, Lilty Wright after the war years.
So not the Hollywood dream story we often hear, more complex.
Much more complex.
And she had a tough background too, right? Something about using wax for dental problems because she didn't have money, and arrests for underage drinking.
That's right. And a history of relationships with men in uniform. There was even a major in the Army Air Force who proposed, but then tragically died in a plane crash.
Wow. So what about her final hours? Before the discovery of her body, what happened right before everything went dark?
Well, the timeline is pretty chilling. January 14th, 1947. Around 2 p.m., she leaves a bar near 5th and Main in downtown L.A.
Okay.
And she hysterically tells an LAPD officer, Merrill McBride, "A man in the bar just threatened to kill me."
Oh,
She gets her purse back, thanks the officer, they go their separate ways. But then, around 4 p.m., the same officer sees her again, just a block south.
no way.
Yeah. Exiting another bar, this time with 2 males and a female. McBride asks if she's okay. Elizabeth says she's fine, heading to the Greyhound station to meet her father.
And that was it. The last time she was confirmed seen.
That was the last confirmed sighting, about 18 hours before her body was found, which, immediately raises a huge question about those 3 people she was.
Absolutely. 2 men and a woman. That's incredibly ominous. So what happened in those missing hours? Between that last sighting and the horrific discovery, what do the sources, particularly Steve Hodell's investigation, piece together?
Right. Hodell's work dives deep into this. He reconstructs what he calls a timeline of horror for January 14th and 15th.
Okay.
The belief is, from about 4:30 p.m. that afternoon till maybe 6 a.m. the next morning, Elizabeth Short was taken by those same 3 individuals believed to be Dr. George Hodell, a guy named Fred Sexton, and an unknown woman to George Hodell's private home.
Hodell's house?
Yeah, 5121 Franklin Avenue in Hollywood. And there, the theory goes, she was drugged, beaten, tortured, sexually assaulted.
So this wasn't like a quick, impulsive act of violence then. It sounds planned, methodical.
No, not at all. Far from it. Experts estimate the torture alone could have lasted 3, maybe 4 hours based on the trauma.
3 to 4 hours.
The details are just incredibly gruesome. It speaks to a prolonged, calculated extreme violence. She was drugged, posed, photographed. Distinctive scalpel cuts to her mouth, almost ear to ear.
Oh, God.
Believed to imitate a painting by the surrealist artist Man Ray, The Lovers.
Lan Ray.
We'll get into that connection. Her right breast was completely removed, never found, possibly buried at the house. Precise cuttings in her pubic area, a piece of flesh with a rose tattoo cut from her thigh and seated into her vagina.
This is just horrific.
And more cuts on her right thigh, crisscross patterns, also thought to mimic another Man Ray painting, Le Quevoque. And while still alive, forced to ingest feces, likely steer manure. Plus, multiple blunt force blows to her head causing unconsciousness, contributing to her death.
The level of precision, the artistic references, it points to a very specific, very disturbed kind of mind. thought print, like you said. What happened to her body after all that?
Well, her body was surgically bisected, a hemicorporectomy.
Hemicorporectomy. What is that exactly?
It's not just hacking someone apart, it's a precise surgical separation taught in medical schools back in the 30s. It suggests someone with real medical training, cold precision.
So a doctor, a surgeon.
That's the implication. This procedure alone could have taken hours, probably done in a bathtub. Then both sections of the body were washed, scrubbed clean, possibly with a nylon brush, towel dried.
Meticulous.
Extremely. The parts were carried out to the garage. Empty 50-pound paper sacks, the kind used for manure and cement, were used to line the car seat or trunk for transport.
And the disposal. The final act.
Around 6:20 a.m. January 15th, the suspect drives northbound on Degnan Boulevard, stops at 3825 South Norton Avenue, removes the body parts, carefully poses them on the vacant lot,
Posed them.
and left the empty manure and cement sacks nearby. An eyewitness later confirms seeing the suspect and his black sedan there for about 4 minutes before driving off.
Your bets.
Then the suspect drives home, gets back around 6:50 a.m., parks the car in his garage. The whole sequence just screams calculation, meticulous planning, leaving behind those disturbing thought prints.
That sheer audacity, that precision, it really narrows down the type of person capable of this. Which brings us to the suspect Steve Hodel identifies. His own father, Dr. George Hodel.
Exactly.
What was George Hodel's background? What made his own son, a former detective, point the finger after all those years?
Well, George Hodel was, on the surface, a prominent LA figure, a psychiatrist, businessman, but also complex, cold, even to his son Steve. Sources say he had this incredibly high IQ 186.
186, wow.
Graduated high school at 14, went to Caltech at 15, left after a year, maybe some scandal, maybe gambling. By 17, he's a crime reporter during Prohibition.
A crime reporter?
Yeah, known for vivid writing, detailed murder coverage, got promoted fast, and crucially later, he becomes a doctor, specialized in surgery. His professors noted his exceptional eye-hand coordination, called him a natural surgeon.
So highly intelligent medical and surgical training and an early fascination with crime reporting. That's quite a combination.
It is.
How did Steve Hodel even begin to suspect his own father? Especially since it was after his father died in '99. That must have been earth-shattering.
It started after George Hodel died. His father's wife, June, gave Steve a photo album, and in it, photos of Elizabeth Short.
Photos of her?
Yes. That, plus his half-sister Tamar later telling him LAPD officers had told her their father was a suspect back then, way back in the 40s. That's what kicked off Steve's deep dive.
Wow.
And Steve Hodel admits he probably wouldn't have investigated if his father was still alive. He has this theory that his father's huge ego might have actually wanted the world to eventually know he was this figure, the Avenger.
Right, those thought prints again, the psychological signature.
Yeah.
What specific evidence did Steve Hodel find linking his father, George Hodel, so strongly to the murder?
Well, beyond the surgical bisection, which points right at a skilled surgeon like his father.
Which he was.
Steve highlights several key things. The suspected crime scene itself, his father's house on Franklin Avenue, those empty manure and cement sacks found near the body.
Yeah.
LAPD later confirmed they were used for transport, and those specific types of sacks were linked to the Hodel residence. There was construction or gardening work done there.
Okay, that's a physical link. What about the artistic connections, the Man Ray stuff? That seems so specific, so unusual.
Absolutely. A very unique thought print. The specific mutilations, the mouth cuts, the thigh patterns mirroring Man Ray paintings. And here's the kicker. Man Ray had actually photographed the Hodel family.
He knew them.
Yes, and some photos were taken at the Franklin house, George Hodel's home, back in 1944.
That's a chilling connection.
Yeah.
It suggests a really deep personal link to that specific art used in the crime itself. Like a signature.
Exactly. A very specific, very disturbing signature.
And what about handwriting? Did that play a part?
It did. Steve Hodel hired a handwriting expert, Miss McFarland, gave her samples without telling her the case details, for an unbiased look.
Right.
She compared known samples of George Hodel's handwriting spanning like 75 years with those Black Dahlia Avenger letters sent to the press back in 47.
And
Her conclusion, a high probability of significant similarities. It's pretty concrete evidence potentially linking his father directly to those taunting letters the killer sent. One famously said, "Have changed my mind, you would not give me a square deal. Dahlia killing was justified."
Dahlia killing was justified. Chilling. This case gets even darker when you bring in the family dynamics. George Hodel faced charges involving his own daughter, Tamar, didn't he? The Hollywood scandal.
He did. In October 1949, Tamar ran away and accused her father of sexual molestation.
Oh, my
The
God.
trial became known as the Hollywood Scandal. Prosecution witnesses backed up Tamar's claims of, well, sordid activities at the Franklin house, allegations of sex parties.
What happened in the trial?
Dr. Hodel was acquitted. The defense basically painted Tamar as unreliable, a pathological liar. But the whole incident exposed this incredibly dysfunctional family, alleged exploitation, and a pattern of disturbing behavior. Steve Hodel sees this as part of the same violent pattern.
A very dark pattern indeed, which raises the awful question. If George Hodel was the Black Dahlia killer, was Elizabeth Short his only victim?
Steve Hodel and others believe she wasn't. They connect her murder to a series of similar killings of young, attractive women in L.A. around that time, the 1940s. Names like Jean French, Ruth Spalding,
Similar methods.
similarities in methods, victimology. Some agencies back then suspected a single killer, but reportedly the LAPD was resistant to sharing information across cases. Steve Hodel talks about feeling just overwhelmed, looking at death certificates, realizing his words, all of this havoc, all of this pain, all of this misery had come from one man, my father. He theorizes maybe rejection by women triggered this violence.
It's just staggering to contemplate. And from the moment her body was found, the media latched onto this, didn't they? It became a huge part of the story.
Oh, undeniably, a complete media frenzy. Newspapers sensationalized everything, and they quickly slapped that name on her. The Black Dahlia, probably a reference to a movie or mystery style popular then.
And the name stuck.
It totally stuck. It transformed Elizabeth Short from a person into like a public spectacle, a character. And back in 47, reporters and police had this kind of symbiotic relationship. Reporters got scoops from police contacts, which shaped how the public saw the case.
Does he show everything? The photos?
They had gruesome photos, but they often edited them, trying to spare the public the absolute full horror of the mutilations.
So the media played a huge role, shaping the narrative. What about the LAPD itself, their handling of it? If they suspected Hodel, as the sources suggest, how did that play out with this massive public attention?
Well, the LAPD prided themselves on being proud, professional, incorruptible, but the sources suggest they face real challenges here. There's a strong suggestion that key people, maybe even high-ranking officers, might have helped cover things up.
Cover up. Why? To protect Hodel or the department?
Maybe both. Protect the department's reputation, shield Hodel, who they knew was a prime suspect. Physical evidence from the case reportedly just vanished, disappeared quickly as the investigation stalled. The current LAPD says they have no knowledge of its whereabouts.
So evidence just gone.
Gone. It really implies a deliberate effort to stifle the investigation. So this case, it's not just about the murder itself. It holds up a mirror to that time, public perception, institutional image, the limits of investigation back then. Nearly 80 years later, it still reminds us that finding the truth isn't just about catching a killer. Sometimes it's about battling systemic issues, too.
It really does. And the Black Dahlia is probably the most famous cold case in American history. Let's talk about that for a bit. What exactly makes a case cold, and how do police even try to tackle these mysteries years, even decades later?
Right. A case officially goes cold when all the immediate probative leads have dried up. It's still open, technically unsolved, but inactive. Some places use an arbitrary marker like 3 years, but honestly, solvability drops off a cliff after about 72 hours.
72 hours. That fast.
Yeah, the first few days are critical, so cold cases represent this enormous backlog of unresolved grief for families, for communities. We're talking potentially 250,000 unsolved homicides just in the U.S. That's why specialized cold case squads started popping up in the late 80s.
250,000. That's staggering. So what do these cold case units actually do? How do they breathe life back into an old file?
Well, a big part is technology. They review old files to see if new forensic methods can help. Think DNA databases, CODIS or AFIS, the automated fingerprint ID system, stuff that didn't exist back then.
Right, DNA is huge now.
Exactly. They also bring in fresh eyes, new detectives looking at the file without the original biases. They might use outside resources like behavioral profiling, the FBI's VICAP program, which looks for links between similar unsolved crimes, and crucially, multidisciplinary teams.
What does that involve?
Bringing everyone together, the investigators, forensic scientists, prosecutors, medical examiners, crime scene analysts, profilers, sometimes even academics, everyone looking at it from their angle.
It sounds like a much more collaborative approach. Our sources mentioned a difference between how the U.S. and Poland handle cold cases.
Yeah, it's an interesting contrast. In the U.S., it's very fragmented. How units are set up, staffed, funded, it varies wildly. Only about 7% of U.S. agencies even have a dedicated cold case unit.
Only 7%. That seems low.
It is. Models range from single units to multi-agency task forces. Poland, being much more centralized, has a more uniform nationwide system. They call them Teams for Undetected Crimes, nicknamed X-Files.
X-Files, I like that.
Right. Small teams, often 2-6 officers, many trained by the FBI, including specialists, retired officers. Because it's centralized, the approach is more consistent across the country. Both systems have successes using new tech, but it highlights how structure and resources matter.
Definitely. Now, circling back to the Black Dahlia specifically, despite Steve Hodel's really detailed work and compelling arguments, the case is still officially unsolved, right?
Technically, yes.
Yeah.
It remains open, unsolved on the public record.
Are there other significant theories out there? Other perspectives the sources mention?
There are. While Hodel's theory is, incredibly significant and detailed, other researchers have proposed different ideas. For instance, one book, Sisters in Death by Eli Frankel, tries to link Elizabeth Short's murder to another killing back in 1941, Layla Walsh in Kansas City,
Suggesting the same killer knew both.
suggesting a single psychopath might have known both victims. It just shows that even with a strong theory like Hodel's, the sheer mystery of the case continues to invite other investigations, other possible connections. That phrase often used for it, a riddle wrapped in a mystery inside an enigma, it really fits, doesn't it?
It absolutely does, the Black Dahlia case. It's so much more than just a grisly unsolved murder. It feels like this complex tapestry of human darkness, the society of the time, and this relentless drive for answers. Steve Hodel's personal journey investigating his own father, that just adds another incredible layer, justice becoming intensely personal.
It really does. And if you zoom out, it reinforces that idea of thought prints, that the unique patterns, the motives of criminals, they can linger, persist through time. As Hodala puts it, absolutely nothing disappears without a trace. The truth was actually out there, if you knew where to look for it.
Hmm.
So this deep dive, it doesn't just shed light on a dark moment in LA history. It reminds us about that deep human need we all have for closure, for understanding, even decades later. It shows that cold cases aren't just dead files. They're puzzles waiting for the right key, maybe a new technology or just a fresh perspective.
So what's the takeaway for you, listening? Maybe consider the hidden stories in your own world, your family, your community. Do they echo larger patterns? Could historical events still be casting shadows today? The Black Dahlia case really challenges us, I think, to look past the sensational headlines, to question the neat narratives, and maybe accept that sometimes the deepest truths are messy, uncomfortable, hidden in the complex legacies people leave behind.